The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Let's do this. All right, welcome everybody.
Yay!
This is a special 5-bucket
I
episode.
can't get that 5-bucket sound effect. I can't get it enough. Point. I think every episode we do is 5-bucket.
Now, Christina, this is your first official 5-bucket episode.
Right.
We have had some inadvertent 5-bucket episodes
back-ended,
occur.
We've
back-ended
like
into
5.
it, yep. That we didn't realize going in we're going to be 5 buckets, but it just turns out that way. But this is your official one movie, no co-feature, 5-bucket episode.
Ooh, we're digging deep on this one.
What a movie it is. John Carpenter's 1982 classic, The Thing. The Thing could actually have been very nicely paired up with us, but that would have been like a 3-hour odyssey, that episode.
Yeah, that would have been much.
So gladly we paired that with them, which we spent about 15 minutes on.
Yes.
So yeah, let's talk about The Thing, released in 1982 at virtually the same time as E.T., the Extraterrestrial.
Wow.
So two very different sides of the same coin. Very
This guy-
friendly alien and one not so.
I was going to say, this guy doesn't eat Reese's Pieces, and last I checked,
no.
E.T. did not amalgam into a dog.
It's funny as well, because when we talked about them, we talked about James Arness. He portrayed The Thing in the original version, 1951, The Thing from Another World, directed by Howard Hawks.
Yeah.
And now, as John Carpenter freely admits, this is a guy in a suit movie, the original Thing from Another World. And he wanted to veer away from that as much as possible.
Oh, and did he?
Did he? And now I don't agree with this. He does say in one of the features that I watched that while Alien is a great movie, it does boil down to just being a guy in a suit. And but I have a little. I took a little bit of umbrage to that.
Umbrage with that one?
Yes.
Does he not know that was a 5-bucket movie for you?
Literally, yes. It is a guy in a suit, but it is.
Yes. Much more.
So transcends that, but that's another discussion. When it was released in 1982, was not received well and failed at the box office.
Really?
Yeah.
I know for a fact I did not see this in the theater.
Well, how old were you in the summer of 1982?
82? Well,
I was 11, so there would have been no way for me to see this in the theater.
And I was 8. So the
Yeah,
only
so
movie
I
that was
was
on my
older.
radar was E.T.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's still traumatizing
Absolutely.
as we brought up.
That was traumatizing.
My
That
little
upset me.
sister, my sister's 10 years younger than me, and my mother brought my brother and I and my sister to go see E.T. And to this day, she will not watch it. She will not watch it. She will not allow her children to watch it. It
Yep.
traumatized her.
Yeah, no, my son watched it once, and he said, I'm not watching that again. Scene where he, dies, quote unquote, at the hands of these government. It's very upsetting.
Yeah, it is.
It's like on a level of Never-Ending Story with the horse going it down into the quicksand. It's terrible. But again, we're here to talk about The Thing.
Yes.
We digress.
So we've already established that we were not of the age to actually see this ourselves in the theater. So we did nothing to contribute to the box office of this movie. So
Or lack
apologies to John Carpenter. I can tell you this, that I've already talked about how much my dad was a fan of the genre of horror and science fiction. He saw this, and I think saw it more than once in the theater, because this quickly became a midnight movie after its initial release and failure. And it became a successful midnight movie, I might add. Critics savaged this as well when it was first released. One quote that I picked up the quintessential moron movie of the 80s.
Whoa.
Wow. Roger Ebert, you brutal bastard.
I don't know who said that, but that's one of the quotes that I found. And the New York Times themselves said this would be entertaining only for fans of spider-legged heads or dog autopsies.
Yeah, well,
So-
the New York Times didn't like The Hidden Fortress either, so they can like keep their film criticism.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a...
I think Vincent
Wow.
Canby was the perpetrator of that quote. And there's one more that I picked up on. I don't know who said this or who wrote this, but Carpenter is better suited to direct traffic accidents, train wrecks.
Wow.
That's brutal.
And that was pre-internet.
Yeah.
That's written up in your local newspaper. Holy,
I would
no
love
wonder
to-
why people didn't go see it.
A lot is made of a movie, why it failed. I think that everybody is towing the same line when you watch the bonus features of The Thing, where it's too nihilistic. It was going against E.T. People wanted a friendly alien. They didn't want to. I don't think that people think that much into what they're going to see and what they're not going to see. I don't think
Right.
people look at a movie. That's too nihilistic. They look at a review.
Nihilistic,
They
right.
look at a review. If
And
it's
then
a
they have
bad
to look
review,
up the word nihilistic.
if it's a bad review, they're not going to see it. I
Yes,
don't think people
yes,
think
you
too
have
much into
Yeah,
it.
people have to realize that back then, like the Roger Eberts and Siskel and Ebert, like were the premier. Like if these guys came on and they're like, this movie, ish, don't go see it. I'm not gonna go see it.
But of course, and we can all testify to this, time has been very kind to The Thing.
Yes.
And I am in disbelief that people would describe it like
Wow.
this. Like it's like they watched a different movie. Maybe they walked into a showing of Ice Pirates and the setup of The Thing, a scientific research team that are in Antarctica. And the beginning is one of the most iconic beginnings of any movie ever, which is we just get the beautiful vista of, I think they filmed it in Alaska, but
Alaska and British Columbia,
BC,
they
yeah.
filmed. So
but we open with a helicopter chasing a sled dog. And
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
absolutely, we talk about, some of these films, fill in that screen, that widescreen, and that wolf on the run with the friggin' chopper behind him.
And talk about whitewashing. It's so bright, I wanted to cry. Just
There you go.
yeah.
Well, actually, there's a scene that precedes that, and I have no memory of that whatsoever, which
Yes,
is the
yes.
spaceship crashing.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
remember.
part of the title sequence.
Right. Which is right up there with Predator, because I think when we talked about Predator as well, I don't remember that opening sequence. It's the exact same thing, the ship coming down,
Mhm.
and I'm like, I don't think you didn't need it.
Actually, this is back up for a second because the titles, you guys know the story about how the titles were made?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But please share.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. He wanted the title designer, he wanted to have this effect, where it would sort of burn away,
Like it was like ripping through the
you know,
celluloid kind of a thing.
right. So it looked like it was burning through the celluloid. So he used like a fish tank and a garbage bag to get the effect. But he talked about it was in the special features on the Shout Factory disc that I watched, and he said that it didn't go right the first time, so he tried several times before he finally got the effect he was looking for. And he said the smell
Oh,
of
jeez.
of the burning garbage bag was unbelievable. It's like toxic chemicals pouring
Yeah.
out basically. Because he was
All in the
burning,
name of art.
Yeah.
yeah, because he was burning this garbage bag over and over.
But how, such a great effect and how simplistic the means to do.
Yeah,
Right.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. Now you just it's computer generated and you do anything, but yeah.
So we see this spaceship crashing, and we later establish that the events of The Thing are happening 100,000 years after the spaceship crashes. So it's quite a long time
100,000
ago.
years later.
So where this is coming from, it's kind of like the space jockey scene pre-Prometheus. It's up to your imagination as to what this all means. But you do get the sense that something is wrong with the spaceship because it's out of control when it crashes.
Space spores.
So then you get the actual opening, which is the helicopter chasing the dog. And it's two Norwegians in the helicopter. And the worst shots, I think, on the face of the earth.
Yeah, you're right. If those damn Norwegians were better shots, this movie would be over in a heartbeat.
Why don't you just drop the grenades instead of trying to shoot at the dog?
Because apparently Antarctica expeditions always have flamethrowers and dynamite. So you should have just thrown a stick of dynamite at the damn dog.
The dog runs into the American research facility, and the helicopter is close in tow. This is when we're introduced to some of the characters here. A great ensemble of actors. Kurt Russell leading the pack as Macready, and he is the pilot of this gang.
Mac.
But we've got Wilford Brimley in there.
Minus his mustache.
And he was, I didn't realize this because you just to assume he's been known and been a character actor forever. This was his first major part.
That's crazy.
Thing.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Keith David is in there as Childs.
Not to be confused with David Keith.
Not to be, yes. That's very easy to do. It's very easy to do. Now, Keith David should belong in the annals of history just for that fight scene and They Live Alone.
Yes. And we so need to go
on
down
the
that
glasses. Put on the damn glasses.
He has the best voice too. Like, I just love when he says anything, really.
Ooh, it just melts my heart.
Now, Richard Mazer is in here, who I've seen a million times. I couldn't tell you
Clark.
one movie that he's been on, but I've seen him a million times in other things as the dog handler. Charles Hallahan, Richard Dysart, all these great guys.
Who's the guy who played Gary?
Donald Moffat.
I thought that was James Cromwell.
No.
Oh, look, it's James Cromwell.
Well done,
and then they get to
done.
Can somebody untie me from this? Wilford Brimley.
So yeah, all these guys, they all come out of their the rec room, and Macready's in his shack, and he's playing Chess Wizard. And this computer is solely for the purpose
of playing chess.
Well,
if you're trapped up in the friggin' Antarctic, you got to have something to do, right? And it was 82, so that was the cutting edge.
And Jeff, Chess Wizard, is voiced by Adrienne Barbeau herself.
No.
Yes.
Because she was married to Carpenter.
She was at the time. This was the only female mother. Interesting.
So Macready is ripped away from Adrienne Barbeau and has to see what's going on outside, as do the rest of this team. And all they see is an innocent dog being shot at by these crazy Norwegians. The dog's coming across the border asking for asylum. It's like, dude, come on over. And of course, the dog knows right where to go. He goes to Clark, who is the dog handler, licking his hands. He's like, save me, please.
That's right.
You know, if the Norwegians just had more of a level-headed attitude towards this, I think that this movie would have been over in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, I can't attest to the veracity of this claim because I don't speak Norwegian. But apparently, if you do, the whole movie is ruined for you at this moment when the Norwegian gets out of the helicopter and starts shouting. Apparently, he gives away everything. But I've never actually had that verified by a native speaker. So
wow.
Imagine this playing in Norway. I might as well go home now. Thanks a lot.
Wait a minute, Darth Vader, Dark Son of a.
You know what would have been brilliant though, if in Norway everything else was dubbed in Norwegian except that line,
right?
And he was in English, right?
That would have been perfect.
Oh man.
That scene also like cracks me up because I'm always amazed at how cavalier Macready is about getting frostbite. Like everybody
I know, he's like covered
outside in like balaclavas and goggles. Like you can't cover up his flowing locks, right?
Right.
It's in his contract.
It's like these guys you see wearing shorts in 20 below, you know?
That's me, dude. Sorry. But let's talk about that giant hat he has. Because I can't look at that thing without thinking he looks like an anorexic Stinky Pete, the prospector from Toy Story.
One of the deleted scenes is him doing the cucaracha around that hat. So not only are there these Norwegians terrible shots, but they also don't know how to handle grenades.
And they know how to spoil a movie. Bastards.
So within 5 seconds of landing, they blow up their own helicopter.
5 minutes in, you're like, what the is going on?
But the guy doesn't stop there. He shoots Bennings in the leg, trying to shoot the dog. And Gary, as we just mentioned, played by Donald Moffat, breaks the emergency glass, it looks like, of one of the windows in the rec room and takes out this mad Norwegian with a shot right through the eye and kills him. And the dog thus becomes part of this team.
Good going, guys.
Yep.
You just ruined all of humanity.
So as they are fretting and wondering who these guys are, and they work out pretty quickly that it says Norge on the side of the
Right.
helicopter, that these guys are Norwegian. The dog has the free run of the facility, and you do see him walking as they're talking below the pool table. He's walking around, he's bumping into people's legs. So he's never put into the pen until later
Much
that
later.
day. And there's actually a scene where the dog walks down the hallway by himself and walks into one of the rooms, and all you see is the shadow of the person that's in that room. So on first viewing, you don't know who it is.
Mhm.
But it's pretty apparent then once you see this a few times and you're more familiar with the actors, you know who it is. The silhouette looks like Norris. So
Yes.
that's who is taken over initially, at least, by the dog. In the meantime, our other main characters are working out where these Norwegians came from, where their camp is. A couple of them with Macready fly their helicopter over to see what the deal is, why these
Right,
Norwegians went nuts.
It's the Dr. Copper, and Macready are the two that go.
And doesn't Windows, the radio guy, isn't he the third guy that goes?
No, you're thinking of something that happens later in the movie. There's no
Only
third
two?
guy.
Are you sure?
There's no third guy, Jim.
Okay.
I watched it yesterday.
Okay.
Conspiracy theory. A lone gunman on
Just Copper and Macready, and they go to the Norwegian base. And when they get there, like everything is smoking, and all the windows are broken, and
Yep.
Everything is covered in ice inside. And like the first if the smoke wasn't an indication that something's gone wrong, when they enter the facility, the first thing they see is an axe embedded in the wall.
Yeah. Well, that's something you don't see every day.
Right. And then they see that their radio operator has killed himself, or at least that's what you're led to believe when you see the frozen blood dripping down his,
You're right. He
his-
slit
his
his
arms.
wrist or something.
And the big money shot here is the hulk of ice that they see, that we later learn has been unearthed, was adjacent to the crashed spaceship. And whatever was in there has melted out. And it looks humanoid from the shape of what came out of the ice. So it looks like it could be a James Arness type figure that was in there. And so once you've seen this movie and then it sinks in, and then you start to ask yourself the questions of like, what was this thing? Did it have an original form? Or when it was in the ice, was it imitating something from another world? Did it come here as an imitation? The questions abound, but I think leaving it ambiguous is probably the best way to go, because as we talked about many times,
it's changed shapes, it's changed its form.
Because this does leave you with a lot of questions that don't get answered, and I don't think the movie suffers for it.
No.
So
Although in the story, in the original story, who goes there, it's not the Norwegians that find the body, it's actually the US team that finds it and defrosts it because they want to do an autopsy, basically.
Yeah, sure.
now, what does it look like in the story? Do they describe it?
It's described as having like 3 red hate-filled eyes, by the way. Like Campbell describes it having hate-filled eyes because it's frozen, in this act of aggression. And it has blue worms, he describes them, around its head. And there's just obviously this sense of this is clearly not something of Earth.
Well,
like a halo. I'm thinking of like a Medusa, like with the blue worms around the head.
Or maybe they're coming off his chin. He looks like a squid.
They also find a body at this, numerous bodies, but they take one back with them, which looks like it's mid-transformation, because it's just an amazing nightmarish sculpt by
oh my god, the
Rob
FX.
Bottin.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Bottin a little bit later, but
he is just such, when you see him in the bonus
Bottin or
features,
Bottin? Is it Bottin?
he is such he's like a likable, goofy kind of fanboy type guy.
Yeah,
that you love to hang out with this guy, right?
Yeah.
Because he
just
loves
the
this
stories.
stuff.
Well, think about the movies that he's worked on. I mean, between RoboCop, Legend, Total
and
Recall.
he was only like 20 years old when he did the thing. So which is even more amazing.
Job almost killed him, though.
Because when you're that young, he just threw himself into this job and lived at the studio. But this sculpt is it's like mid transformation, and it really focuses on the face, which is like melting into 2 different faces. It's like
It's crazy.
it's
Yeah,
like
awesome.
cellular, this body trying to separate itself from itself. So they somehow load this onto the helicopter and bring it back.
I wouldn't have touched it.
No.
Thank you very much.
So you wonder, well, it's got to be smart because they established that this thing isn't dead. So it was alive when they put it in the
Right.
helicopter. It doesn't want to kill itself
Well,
by
I was gonna say,
downing
it's just
the
kind of like
helicopter.
waiting, waiting for another victim to come along.
So they do an autopsy, and Blair, played by Wilford Brimley, is just fascinated by this thing. So he gets his hands on it, and it's later on in the evening that the dog is put into the kennel.
Oh,
Now, this scene was done by Stan Winston because he came in to do some overlap because Bottin was just overwhelmed with all the effects that he had to do for this movie. So Winston worked on the dog monster. And now this dog, I learned from the bonus features, is part wolf. So the way that it carries itself is very bizarre. When he walks into the kennel, it just doesn't react at all to the other dogs. It just very stoically sits down in the Sphinx pose and stares straight ahead as the other dogs are kind of uneasily looking at this.
he's like an alpha male, man.
Yeah. And then the minute that Clark walks away, this thing starts to go berserk. And the tentacles start coming out. The dog,
man.
it splits like a banana, and the face of the dog. And what it's trying to do is to assimilate and copy these dogs that are in the kennel. And there's one scene where it's spraying one of these poor dogs like a hose with something. And my imagination goes to maybe this is some kind of anesthetic that it's like uses to subdue its victim or whatever. Clark hears what's going on, runs back, and alerts everybody to come and see. And there's one of the great scenes is, I think it's Macready that asks him, what did you see? Well, it's weird and pissed off, whatever.
Yeah, that mutation scene is just, it's so impressive.
And the one dog that gets sprayed is actually trying to break out of the kennel. It's
he's
actually
chewing through the wires.
Through the wire. One dog that's smart enough to try to get out of the situation, so the alien's got to subdue it.
And so this is where the first flamethrower comes into play as well. It tries to escape. It grows these giant claws, breaks its way through the ceiling, and it's pulling itself up. And then Childs comes in with the flamethrower, and it opens up. Its stomach opens up, and this flowered thing comes out. And Bottin, you never would catch this just by watching it without knowing. But Bottin says if you freeze frame it, it's just for a split second you see it, but this flower is actually made up of dog tongues and dog teeth.
Oh,
So then they burn it and start their own autopsy on this. And this is where Blair comes up with the idea that this organism was from the dog that was running from the helicopter, and that it was trying to copy the other dogs that were in the kennel. This is where my continuity kind of got thrown, because this is when they go back to the base, because they find some of the videotapes that they've brought back. They've brought back notes, they've brought back videotapes, and they see that they found something in the ice at the Norwegian camp.
Right. So then they go back to try to find out what they found, and they find the structure of the ship.
Right.
In I don't want to say a valley, but they have to go over the side of a cliff down to it. Because
the Norwegians have burned out the ice to get down to the ship.
Right.
And you'd love, because you do see them climbing down and they're walking on the ship. I wish they would have shown them going inside the ship.
Yeah. And the ship's pretty massive. It's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive.
And that's where they find also the hole in the ice where they pulled out the occupant of the ship. And the crazy thing is this was done as a matte painting. When you look at some of those bonus features, it was done on like the greenest green lawn that you can think of, with a white sheet thrown over it that they walk over to get to this hole in the ground. And the rest of it was just put in afterwards. So it looks like they're walking in snow. Again, it's just some of the most simple effects, but with the most
magic
beautiful
of movies.
Results. Yes. Now, at this point, Blair realizes that they've been at risk of infection as well, that it's not just the dog. He zeroes in on Clark especially, because Clark has been alone with a dog more than any of them. After he thinks about it, he's looking at this very rudimentary computer graphic of the thing taking over different organisms. Now, the way that he works it out is that the thing can only take over one thing at a time. right? But it's established that it can be multiple things at the same time.
Right, because it already, I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, at this point, it's been the dog and it's also like Norris simultaneously.
Yeah.
And after they kill the dog and they're like, oh, well, we're going to store it. And then it's trying to become Bennings, because it takes Bennings at that point.
I assume that it destroys the original body.
Yeah.
And then
Oh, yeah, you would
becomes
have
that
to,
body.
right.
Yeah. It's not like he's leaving traces behind.
Right, because that's what happens, and they catch it sort of in the process of transforming. You see Benning's hands are not right. They're still mutated. They haven't like come into form yet, and then they all see it. But despite the fact that they all see it and they know it's not Benning's, half of them still don't believe that the thing can really do this.
Yeah,
there's a great scene where the child says, I don't believe any of this voodoo bullshit.
I want a T-shirt that says that on there.
It's like, Blair, do you believe any of this voodoo bullshit?
But Blair goes nuts just thinking about the implications of this. Because the first thing he does is that he destroys the radio, and then he covertly destroys their means of getting out, the helicopter. Blair goes so nuts that they sequester him away from everybody else. They lock him in a shack. Now, it could be said that Blair was the first one that was infected and is trying to get himself sequestered because he takes that opportunity to build himself a spaceship.
Spaceship, yeah.
So was he infected the entire time is a big question here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you can make an argument either way, that he was one of the first people, the first infected, or that he was out there and the thing got to him while
he's tapping the pencil against as he's looking, and he's alone with the dog corpse, and it's established later on that the things aren't dead, that they're still so could have gotten them at that point. At some point, Blair does get infected. The red herring here is Clark, and it's brilliant because Clark is the only one that's been alone, and Blair zeroes him out. So, and again, if Blair was infected, that would be
divert blame.
A diversion.
Yeah.
Very much akin to the chestburster scene from Alien. At one point, Gary, they come up with an idea that they're going to use uncontaminated blood to mix with everybody else's, and there would be a reaction if somebody was infected.
Doctor says we can do a blood serum test.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and they have clean samples that are locked away. And the only two that have the key to this refrigerator are Gary and Copper. And they find that the blood has been destroyed. So there's a fight at that point because everybody thinks that Gary is the one that's the infected. And so Gary actually, he's got the gun pulled on everybody, and then he puts the gun down. He's like, just to prove to you, somebody else can take charge. And this is one of the biggest questions of the movie for me, because they are about to give it to Norris, and he says, I don't think I'm up to it. Now, looking at the bonus features, the actor that plays Norris, Charles Hallahan, he played it because he knows that he's infected. He is the one that the dog visits early on. You only see his shadow. So he is one of the first infected. And he played it like he didn't know absolutely that he was infected, but he knew that something was off. So that begs the question, do people that are infected by this thing know somehow, or don't they? Because he played it like he didn't know, but others, like later on when you see Palmer infected, say, and Blair, they absolutely know that they are the thing and they have an agenda. So there's a little bit of inconsistency there, if you think.
There's also an interesting thing that happens because Norris keeps acting like he's sick. I don't know if you caught that.
Yeah, because he keeps,
like he keeps sort of like grabbing onto his stomach, or he seems like there's something wrong with him, and you kind of wonder, is there a sort of an expiration date on the amount of time the thing can spend as an organism, creature? Because it came into the camp pretending to be this one dog, and then it decides to take over these other dogs, but there's really no reason for it to do that at that moment. It's like, well, I've gotten into the camp, right? I've sort of infiltrated my way in, and there's no reason for it to sort of draw attention by turning into something else, and you start to get this feeling that maybe it has to turn into something else at that moment. Just like later, Norris seems like when it's revealed that he's the thing, it's like he can't hold it together anymore. He has to be something else.
Or his body was weak to begin with, like, because he has a heart attack, what looks like a heart attack. So if the thing imitates him perfectly, he imitated that weak heart as well. So its own body, its imitation was rebelling against itself, just like Norris's body would have been in that same situation. So yeah, you could look at it either way. It looks like Norris is having a heart attack. So that really is the catalyst for the craziness that is about to happen, because they get him on a table and they're trying to do what, with the paddles, with the defib paddles. And this is, and the way that they film this, the backstory is almost as disturbing as what you see on screen here. Norris's chest opens up, and they did it like John Hurt in Alien, where only his head and shoulders were above the table and the rest of his body was below, so they could build a fake torso to open up. And it chomps off Copper's arms. And they made the arms of like gelatin and just stuff that could easily be broken. But in order to film it, they got a guy that actually had his arms amputated in an industrial accident, they called it. So for this guy to relive having his arms amputated with blood spurting must have been so disturbing and traumatic. Yeah.
They better paid him well.
But the amazing thing is, Bottin says in order to get a long shot of him like flailing around with his arms, they actually built a facial prosthetic to make the guy look like Copper. So not only did they, have all the blood spurting from his arms, the guy's wearing a Copper mask, and it's flawless. It looks like Copper, even knowing that it doesn't look like it's an effect.
So I actually saw this film on 70 millimeter last year at the Music Box, and I bring this up now because when we saw this in the theater, a large portion of the audience laughed when this happened.
Oh no!
And I was so irritated by it because my son had never seen the movie, and we took him to see it for the first time. I was like, "Oh, we're gonna see," his first experience would be on the big screen, and the audience almost ruined it because it's such a shocking scene. It is supposed to be like the chest burster scene, in Alien. It's supposed to take you by surprise. It's supposed to make you jump out of your seat. And like a bunch of people were like, ha ha ha, that guy got his arms bit off. It's not the kind of thing that you laugh
Here
at.
it comes. What did he have for breakfast?
Like De Niro in Cape Fear, ribbing the guy next to him. Doesn't even end there. Then Norris's head stretches off the table and grows spider legs.
Yes.
So great. This is one of the best scenes in the movie, though, because Palmer has the best line.
Yeah, then Palmer's like, "You gotta be kidding."
Which is great, because what was that? The It Chapter 2? They actually mimic that.
Yeah, they do.
Right?
They do.
With the head and the spider legs.
But then you got to think: is Palmer infected at this point? Because he is later. Is he just playing everybody for a fool?
I wouldn't trust anybody. Just burn the place down.
So that scene is done. So they torch the head. Now this is where we start to get into the Macready stuff, where the thing is trying to frame Macready. It's already established by Knowles that somebody left dirty drawers in my kitchen, and like they're all ripped up, and they establish from that the thing rips through your clothes or something. Didn't really happen with Bennings, which is also but whoever is infected at the time, it could have been Palmer, it could have been it could have been Norris or whomever, puts these long underwear into Macready's shack. So they end up framing Macready, and the rest of the gang thinks that Macready is one of the things,
right? Because
he's so keen on taking control of the group. And he comes back at one point, and his beard is all frozen. He's got a stick of dynamite, and he's like, "Anybody comes near me, we're gonna blow." And that's when they come up with the idea of the second blood test, which is one of the best jump scares, I think, in the movie.
Now, just that whole scene, that buildup is so tense and so it's crazy.
I mean, it should be established at this point, like that Clark has tried to rush him and gotten shot. So Clark is dead, Copper's dead, Norris has been taken over, Bennings has been taken over, Fuchs actually seemingly set himself on fire, so
kills himself,
so he wouldn't be taken over. So you're down to like you know, like half the guys that were
Right.
originally in
Blair's locked up, sequestered away.
right, Blair's locked up. So it's Macready, Childs, Knowles, Windows, Palmer, and Gary. And they're all going to do this blood test that Macready comes up with, you know, that he observed that the thing ran from fire, as all sensible things do.
Right.
Right. Right. And if this thing, every part of it is its own being, then its
That
blood will
right.
react. Yeah.
That it's like
Yeah.
each cell is autonomous, almost, is what he's arguing.
Yeah.
Right. So then he's going to put a hot needle in a tray of blood, everybody's blood, one at a time, to see who's human.
And this was one of the squeamish moments for me, was just watching Windows cut his thumb open to get the blood sample. Like, I'm just like, oh.
Yeah.
And then just, it was like, show me giant creature aliens transforming, but
and then just wipe it on your pants to cut the next guy's thumb. They tie who they think are infected. So it's Gary, because he had access to the original blood for that test. It's Palmer. And why do they suspect Palmer? Because he was alone with...
Just because, you know, he actually has Windows tie up Clark and Copper's dead bodies too.
Yes.
Just like,
yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an abundance of caution. Like, you know,
and when they test Clark, there's a great line that Childs has when they test Clark. So that makes you a murderer. Then, you know.
Right.
Because
he was human.
Yep.
He was human. That makes you.
So we get to Palmer's blood test, because another red herring, they're distracting you, because he says the reason he's going to do Gary last is because he was the only one that had access to the blood.
Oh, he so wanted Gary to be the creature.
So, and it's almost like an afterthought, him putting the needle into
because
Palmer's
he's
blood.
eyeing up Gary. He's going, we're safe.
Like, that's why I'm doing you last, and boom,
That's right.
and then bam, then the blood. Yes. And first of all, I wouldn't hold it in my hand as I was testing these things.
I'd be like, you'd be like that back like this. Let me just check that from afar.
Palmer just explodes on the couch and chomps down on Windows in the process.
Yeah.
Who has
and
been,
again, these physical transformations are you know, these full body sculpts are just pretty impressive.
And just the whole scene where Palmer's body just leaps onto the ceiling. It gets burned, and Windows has just been flailing away because Palmer had chomped down on his head. So they have to burn both Palmer and Windows, but not before Palmer runs out into the snow.
Yeah.
And then Macready throws some dynamite now and blows it up. Now, if this thing, every piece of it is alive, then he's just
you have multiple. You got multiple. What have I done?
She's getting pretty like desperate at this point, you know, because every time they think they've burned the thing, you know, it reemerges somewhere.
Yep.
You know, and like I said, now they're down to just a few of them, because, you know, now Windows is dead, now Palmer is dead, and it's just Macready, Childs, Gary, and Knowles. That's it.
And Blair.
Now
and
we
Blair,
know,
right? Who's
and
off
Blair. Now the four of them that are in the rec room know that they are human. At this point, you do not leave each other's sight. All four of you. Yes.
You would think.
You go everywhere together. You do everything together. Nope. First thing they do is split up.
Right.
Right. Again, like I always say this, don't split up in a horror movie, because something bad's going to happen, you know, and especially when you know that the thing can only operate if it kind of gets you alone.
Yeah.
Right. So why would you separate? They go out to test Blair, and they discover that he's not there. And they find the little tunnel underneath the shed where it's been building a spaceship. So Macready's basically like, we're going to die anyway, so let's just burn everything and make sure that it can't get away.
Leave.
They leave Childs alone as a lookout.
All right, you stay here. We'll be right back. Let us know if you see anything creepy.
But yeah, the minute they get back, they're going to be like, so what were you doing, Childs?
Right, exactly. Just setting them up.
But Childs ends up wandering away because he thinks he sees something in the snow. And that's the last you see of him until the very, very end of the movie. And so now you only have Knowles, Macready, and Gary. And they're looking for Blair. They're throwing dynamite into every room. They're blowing up every building. And there's a great scene where they go to the generator room. And Macready asks Gary if he can fix the generator. He's like, the generator's gone. But yeah, but can you fix it? It's gone.
It's
Yeah.
gone. No, really.
Because the power's gone out.
I was just going to bring that up because it is
Yeah.
beautiful the way, the colds, the blues, especially against the reds once you start hitting off all those explosions and the lights and whatnot.
So now we've got 3 heroes left.
Right.
And now, first of all, Knowles doesn't have the kind of personality where he would wander off, but that's exactly what he does. So he just kind of wanders off into the dark because he hears something, and that's the last you see of him. You don't see what happens. Now, apparently, they actually did have something written where you see Knowles kill himself rather than be taken over by Blair. But I guess they didn't have time or they didn't have the budget or what have you. So that never made it into the movie. So what happens to Knowles is just a big question mark. But soon it's just Gary and Macready.
No
And not
longer
even
there.
Gary, because then you see Blair take out Gary with that weird scene where he puts his fingers.
That's really disturbing.
Yeah.
See, it's
like
weirdly
inside his skin, kind of
personal. It's weirdly personal, don't you think?
Right.
You know, no, I mean, like, it's almost like he has a hostility against Gary that he doesn't have against anybody else.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Maybe
Because he thought he was James Cromwell.
Right.
You're not Cromwell.
Now, I would have loved to have seen like a final, maybe a discussion between Macready and Blair, just so Blair could give him, it's great being the Thing. You don't get old. You don't ever die. But this is where in the bonus features, it's revealed that the Blair monster was rendered in stop motion initially.
Yeah, I will tell you. So I ended up with the Blu-ray, and it kept freezing at this very moment where he's coming through under the floorboards, and I had to rewind it and get it to go again like 10 times. And once you see the tentacles come up, and he grabs the Wile E. Coyote dynamite plunger, it's very obvious that it is stop motion. But in the flow of the movie, you don't really pick up on it.
Right.
It's,
and the actual creature was also, but Carpenter was so disappointed with the effect that they cut it and they just went back to Rob Bottin and something more practical.
Which is, again, just absolutely unlike anything you've ever seen on film. It really is gorgeous to behold. I mean, yeah, it's horrific, but from an art perspective, it's pretty impressive.
And again, it raises the question of whether this thing ever had an original form, because what you see is just a mixture of what
I mean, it
it's
changes,
already
and
imitated.
that's the cool thing is it changes every time you see it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, who knows? We'll never know.
Macready lights the last stick of dynamite, does the fuck you too, and then blows him up. Now, is the Thing dead or not? Because Macready is pretty much resigned to his fate, because he's destroyed the camp and he's got no recourse left to just sit there and die.
Freeze to death, yeah.
Who does he run across but Childs?
Childs.
Who says that he thought he saw Blair, but got lost in the storm and has just made his way back now. And so they sit down across from each other and they have a little discussion about, well, if either of us has any surprises, none of us are in any shape to do anything about it. And they start sharing the bottle of whiskey. And that's the end of the movie.
Cut
so
to black.
You don't know if Childs is the Thing or not.
No.
And as Macready had said earlier, that its purpose at this point was to just freeze
And
until
wait.
somebody finds it. So if it is Childs, it wouldn't want to become Macready. It's got no point in doing that. So so you don't know. And
A little open-ended.
open-ended, yes.
Yep.
Now, do we have any preferences as to, do we think that now they're dead regardless of whether or
Correct.
not Childs
Yeah,
is
which
the
is
Thing?
pretty sad. Like
I would like to
most-
think that Childs is telling the truth, that he is not the Thing.
I'll take him at face value.
I don't know. I enjoy uncertainty, so I.
Yes. Are you certain?
Yeah. I never watched it as uncertain. I always thought the child was telling the truth.
I've seen different things, not from like a primary source, but I've seen things where people have said, Carpenter says they have said they both are. Carpenter says neither are, and Carpenter won't say. So basically, he's been out there throwing out red herrings since this film has come
For
out.
40 years. I like it.
He won't admit, and I love this kind of ending to a film, and I really want to mention at this point, I think the Ennio Morricone score to this film is awesome. Just the theme, the like sort of understatedness of it, one of my favorite horror movie themes.
Now, I never took notice that Carpenter himself didn't do the score for this until this viewing. I don't know why, but I never caught that in the main titles because it is a very Carpenter-esque theme.
Yeah, Morricone definitely did the main theme and sort of the major orchestrations. And I don't know if you guys saw, because you have a different version of the Blu-ray than me, but there's an interview with Mick Garris on the Shout Factory disc that I have, where Carpenter talks to him about various aspects of the film. And he says that for a couple of scenes where it didn't have music, he filled in, just a few things, like with this synthesizer, basically. But it is a Morricone score.
Studio obviously not happy with the ending. They insisted that some alternate endings be shot that thankfully
But you want your
were not
heroes to
used.
survive. You want the bad guy to be...
So one of them was even worse than the one that they used. It had Childs and Macready getting rescued, but it turns out they were both the thing, and which is revealed at the end once they reach the next base or wherever they're rescued from. And then there's another ending which shows just Macready surviving and getting a blood test at the lab that he's brought back to, and it's revealed that he's not the thing. But I think that one was put in for a while, and then Carpenter changed it back to the ambiguous ending. It's completely fits in with the tone of the movie as it's been established. So
Yeah.
Right. This thing's unstoppable. You're not going to...
Fun fact, the script was written by Bill Lancaster, who's Burt Lancaster's son. Yeah. I don't know if you guys knew that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yep. Carpenter said, he got more money for this to make this film than he had for any other film he'd ever made.
Well, he was coming off Escape from New York, too, the year before, right?
Right. And all of his films up to that point had made a profit, and not just made a profit, but had made like huge profits. So the studio had very high expectations for this movie making money. I mean, obviously no one could have anticipated that it would go up against E.T.
E.T., right? Curse
And
you.
I actually read that it was released the same day as Blade Runner.
That was a damn good year, 82.
Another film I think that, wasn't as well received on its initial release and became
Blade Runner's a little too heady.
Cult classic. So, hey, you guys, who's your favorite character that's not Macready?
Blair. There was a lot going on with him.
Mm-hmm.
He was ahead of the curve.
I got to go with Childs, if not just for the voodoo bullsh line.
I think, mine's probably Clark, actually, because he's like the big quiet guy with his dogs, and
He has kind eyes.
yeah,
Kind eyes.
I love those kinds of guys.
Yes.
My son also says
Those are his
Clark
kids.
has the second best facial hair in the movie.
Russell actually grew out his beard and hair for a full year before filming this movie to make sure that he had the proper amount.
Well, if you're going to Antarctica,
Now,
you gotta fuzzy up.
Some fun facts as well that I pulled out. Russell and Carpenter obviously knew each other and were friendly from Escape from New York. So Carpenter was actually talking to Russell about the thing, about who he could possibly get to play Macready before he considered Kurt Russell. So a couple of different actors came up. Christopher Walken. Can you imagine that?
It would have been a really different part.
It would have completely been. Jeff Bridges was another one that was thought of.
That's believable.
I could see that. Yeah.
Nick Nolte was another one.
He should just play the alien.
So all those guys fell through for one reason or other, and then Carpenter was like, "Why don't you play it?"
You want to do it?
Then
Well,
it
I gotta
was-
grow my hair out.
And he did.
He later cast Jeff Bridges in Starman.
Yes, he
That is
did. Yes, he
true.
did. He got a second chance with Bridges.
Mhm.
So this film project was in the works since the mid-'70s. Toby Hooper was attached to direct
Ooh.
first.
Mhm.
Then John Landis soon after that. It kind of lost steam then with the success of Alien. They thought that maybe it had a shot at the box office, and they brought in Carpenter, who again, with Escape from New York, Halloween, nothing but successes really up until
Right.
then.
Unlike shoestring budgets.
Yeah, and Carpenter said that he thought it had affected his career later, the failure of this, because he was about to get Firestarter, the Drew Barrymore movie, which again
Right.
was no great shakes in itself, but he was in line to direct that after The Thing, and he lost it because
That's
of the
interesting
failure
because
of The
David
Thing.
Keith is in that.
Yes,
Right?
he is.
Right.
And then
He plays-
Carpenter, he ended up doing a Stephen King anyway because Christine was his next movie after this. But I think Starman was a big success. I don't think.
Starman was, but that's not. It's so funny because you don't really think of it as a Carpenter film, do you?
No, you
No,
don't.
not
You
at
don't.
all. It's a love story.
And I think it's the only film. I think I remember reading this. It was the only Carpenter film that's ever been nominated for a major award because Jeff Bridges was nominated for an Oscar, for a Best Actor Oscar for that film.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Hey, I forgot that too. But
Yeah. That's been so long since I've seen that.
cost $15 million to make, and it only made back $19 million. Yes, big disappointment for Universal.
Well, it's got must have made its money back once it hit video sales. Midnight.
Oh yeah, I'm
showings,
sure it does. Yeah, video
right?
sales almost immediately once it started to make the rounds on cable. I think it picked up steam because that's obviously when I saw it. Loved it. As soon as I was able to buy a copy of the VHS, it was on my shelf. Almost 100% of the reviews that came out in '82 were negative. They're very small percentage.
That's crazy.
Were positive, but I'm just curious to know, like, if any of those reviewers would completely change their tune today. I'm sure that they would.
Oh, I'm sure. Are either of you familiar with the story behind the movie poster artwork?
No.
So we know who Drew Struzan is. Drew Struzan is probably one of the premier preemptive poster commercial illustrators of the 80s. Any Star Wars poster, anybody who has any kind of Star Wars stuff in their room knows this guy's name.
Well, he did all the Raiders and Indiana Jones posters as well.
You name, between Spielberg, Goonies, Muppet movie. I mean, I could just go to the list, and now everything is just photoshopped. It's just big heads on top of big heads. But this guy was, phenomenal. And they contacted him and asked him, we have this movie, and are you available? By the way, we need it tomorrow. He painted this poster overnight.
Wow.
And they told him, we don't have any photos for you. We don't have any concept stuff. We just want you to do the drawing of what you think you do and then do a painting of it by tomorrow morning. Like, how vague is that? And he said straight up, so you spent millions of dollars on this thing and you don't have any reference material and I could just do whatever I want? Sure. So the poster is so iconic now because it's so simplistic in its the necessity for him to just commit something to canvas. And he threw on some winter jacket. His wife took a couple Polaroids. He did a couple quick little scribbles. They approved it. And then he ended up shooting some additional shots of his wife in the coat, 35 millimeter. She processed the film because apparently they had their own lab. And then he worked overnight, all day and overnight, and delivered this thing. The guy came knocking on the door 9 o'clock in the morning, and he made the courier wait an extra hour so he could finish it. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But it is like I said, one of the more iconic pieces of art that's out there for a movie because it just leaves so much to the imagination. If anybody doesn't know, I mean, we could probably share this on our Facebook or even on Twitter because it's just a silhouette of somebody in a snowsuit with all these beams of light and these prism color schemes. Blue, again, we talked about the blue, which is great because he had no point of reference whatsoever, and yet the blue plays in so heavily in the look and feel of this movie. So I just was fascinated that this guy was like, yeah, okay, you're giving me carte blanche to do whatever I want, so off I go.
So interesting that happened to the artist because I watched the interview with Alan Dean Foster on the Shout Factory disc where he talked about the novelization. And it's completely weird that there was a novelization to begin with. And he talked about that because it's from a short story.
Right, because it's based
so normally when you have, existing source material, you don't do a novelization from it. And but he had done a lot of them at that point, and they asked him to do the novelization for the film, and they gave him an earlier version of the script that had a slightly different ending than the one in the film. They also didn't give him any reference materials. They didn't give him production stills. They didn't give him anything. He had
Which
no
is
idea.
So bizarre because they couldn't have just been creating this movie in a vacuum. It doesn't make any sense.
And I had his novel too. I remember.
The novelization.
Yeah.
Because as a kid, we talked about this with Alien. The only way that you got anywhere near these movies theater was reading the book because you couldn't see it.
Hmm.
I got two more fun facts. It was nominated for an award, a Razzie Award.
Oh, really?
Get this, worst musical score.
What?
Christina's having a meltdown.
We
right
just,
now.
yeah.
Oh,
It
I
just, we
feel
just said,
Who's on this Razzie committee?
so iconic. It didn't win. Nominated for.
Well,
Oh.
But, and also when it made the rounds on TV, on broadcast TV, a practice back then before the advent of video or at the dawn of video is to pad out a movie for like a 3-hour epic event. You would put in footage that wasn't seen in the original theatrical release.
Right.
The Thing was no different. They actually added a scene at the very end of the dog running away from the camp the next morning, which Carpenter has disowned. Apparently, they took footage from the beginning, put it at the end. So it made it look like a dog escaped.
Yeah, so thus giving you your answer, which was it's no longer ambiguous. The damn thing escaped.
Yeah.
So again, though, the Shout Factory edition that I have actually has the TV version on the.
Yeah, so my
Blu-ray.
disc, my regular DVD has that as well. So it shows that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have breaks for commercials too?
No, unfortunately, it does not. It does not. But there you have it. We are inducting The Thing
There
into
you
the
go.
5-bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun to watch again.
It certainly was.
Yeah, if you're a fan of special effects, this between Stan Winston and Rob Bottin's work is just ridiculous. And as I mentioned before, it almost killed him. I think after this, the poor kid was hospitalized with exhaustion, pneumonia, and a bleeding ulcer.
Well, he was behind almost from the get-go. They needed so many
It's crazy.
like practical effects, and
right.
he just there was so much to make, and he didn't have enough time or prep
And that was like
time.
a solid year. I think he spent a solid year plus working on this stuff. But that just blows my mind that they're basically saying we have no behind the scene production pictures, notes, anything.
And even though, he's got Snake Plissken on his resume, Jack Burton on his resume, I think that this is Kurt Russell's definitive movie role.
I agree. This is actually a bone of contention in my household because my
Really?
husband really loves Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah. Well, that does have its merits. I have to say it does.
None of you saw Sky High?
Should I cue the crickets again?
Cue away, dude. Listen, they're not all gems.
So next week, Christina will not be here, unfortunately.
What?
Again. She will be doing the good work as she did.
She
last
is. She's
week.
out spreading the word, man.
Yes.
I love it.
But she is going to be missing us covering Onward, the latest Pixar. And she is just so upset she cannot even speak right now. So
She's speechless.
And along with Onward, just like when we did Condor, man, we are reaching deep, deep, deep into the Disney vault, and we are pulling out the Black Cauldron.
Ooh, that's a good one. I
is.
can't even tell you. Boy, I've probably seen this once in my life.
Now, I think we named this. One of our confessionals was, what do we think Disney should do as a live action next? Because we're getting, Aladdin, we're getting Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, we're getting all the
Lion
90s.
King,
We're getting all the 90 hits.
we're getting Mulan. And I think Black Cauldron was one of our answers. Maybe they should go obscure.
Dig deep. I'm actually really excited about Onward, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Pixar likes to play with my emotions, so.
Bring your hankies to Onward. So I think we can put this one to bed.
Oh, no, don't go to bed.
The Thing.
That's when he gets you.
Don't be away. 5-bucket list. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yes, thank you, as always.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, tmiconfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
No!
Yes.